glider operations. Like Kevin mentioned, the airways. You see Victor 103 goes right by you, going up through here. MEA on that airway is 6,300 feet. So you're not going to have IFR traffic below that. But somebody said, well, what about people departing Roanoke? Well, everybody coming off Roanoke right now, if we're in a 2-4 operation or a 3-3 operation, they're coming off and they're going westbound. Nobody goes northbound out of Roanoke on an IFR flight plan unless it's just a VFR pilot who wants to try that climb a ridge. So off 3-3, we turn left to 250 and head down the valley. And that is so we can maintain radar contact with all the aircraft. Also gives the guys a chance to climb before they have to cross the ridge. Standard operating procedure is a 250 heading until they're out of 3,200 feet. That's the ridge line. I'll start turning northbound at that point. So a real slow climber could be a factor for you, but more than likely it's not. The only aircraft I know that operate in and out of Roanoke that goes up Victor 103 that ever might be anything is Northwest Airlines flies the Saab in and out of here. And because he has limited capability in his aircraft, he files Victor 103 to Elkins before going to Detroit. But
define limited capability, please.
Limited capability? Well, he's not going to be out of 7,000 feet by the time he gets over Newcastle. So what we do is we take him from that westbound heading 250 a little longer before we turn him northbound. That is, all your regional jets, they're going either direct Charleston, direct Grinnell, direct Beckley. So they're not going to be a bother your operation, because by the time we get them out 5 miles from the airport, going direct Charleston, they're going further and further away, and they're climbing all the time. So they're not a problem for you. Like I say, the only one I can think of on a regular basis is the guy that's going up Victor 103 in a low performance aircraft. The other airway that may affect you is the one that comes right down through here. That's got a 5,300 foot MEA, and it's very little traffic in there. The problem is, a guy 5,300 feet on that airway, it's outside of Roanoke's airspace, but we'll never see him on our radar. Our radar is so limited. Somebody over Newcastle is going to have to be with a transponder probably above 5,500 feet before I'll see him. I tried to do a test the other day, but since Kevin contacted, we haven't had a lot of traffic in that area, and I couldn't get anybody to give me a call. I know the hospital helicopters sometimes go from here to Elkins or here to Clarksburg, and they go right over Newcastle. At 3,500 feet is what it takes to get across the ridge. We're not going to see him until he's about 10 miles, within 10 miles of Roanoke, actually within about 7 miles. One of the things we have is they classified Roanoke as a mountainous terrain for our minimum vectoring altitude. We're the only place in the eastern United States that's been classified as mountainous, which means that our minimum vectoring altitudes are all 2,000 foot above the terrain. So what they've done is literally everything within 5 miles north and west is now 7,000 feet is the minimum vectoring altitude. So you're not going to get IFR traffic over Newcastle less than 7,000 feet. There's a little shelf out here. I have a minimum vectoring altitude chart if anybody wants to look at it after we finish to kind of go over it. But just rule of thumb, 5 miles from the airport, parallel with the runway, runway 24, everything northwest is going to be 7,000 feet. And that way, you're not going to have to worry about it until you get above there. Again, if we know that your glider operations are going on, we're going to keep people away from the Newcastle area. I know that you all don't limit your operations right over Newcastle. You're especially on a good soaring day, you're running up and down the ridge. But if we know that the gliders are out, we usually hold our jet traffic up a little higher. And that's the ones I really worry about, are the jet traffic coming in. Every now and then you get somebody who's going down, say, I-81, and they're riding along the ridge. That's the guy we like to make alert that, hey, there's possible glider activity in your area. Because he actually could be at an altitude that might affect something. FARs, Kevin has told me to kind of speak on those. So I called FSDO in Roanoke, or in Richmond, because I don't really, To me, an FAR doesn't really apply to my operation unless somebody breaks one, violates an FAR. So I called the guy and I said, okay, how do you feel about glider operations within 4 miles of an airway? That's what it talks about. It says unusual attitude. And it says an unusual attitude is something that a 60-degree bank, unusual descent, unusual rate of climb. These things all a glider does in normal flight. So he says it's up to you to decide what's an unusual attitude for a safety flight. Gliders, 60-degree banks, they do it all the time. So as long as that's a normal operation for you, nobody's going to be out there trying to cite you for flying a glider within the lateral bounds of an airway doing aerobatics. That's not what we're looking to do. We're all here because we love flying. So if for some reason, and I pose this question to several people, is you're out here and there's a beautiful day and you're out here flying around Newcastle and you're having a good time, and one of these thunderstorms you talked about moves in on top of Newcastle. And you're up here in a glider and you can stay up for quite a while, but it doesn't look like the thunderstorm's going anywhere. And you're going to come down sooner or later. What happens if you get caught on the south side of the ridge? Well, again, our frequency 18.3 to the tower, make a call to the tower and say, hey, I'm up here in a glider and I'm coming your way. I'm not going to deny you to come into Roanoke, but I'd like to have the call before you enter my pattern rather than after you enter my pattern. Again, our radar is so poor and a glider is so small, me seeing you on radar and actually identifying you as, hey, here's a guy coming in from Newcastle and possibly a glider, he may be coming into land, versus a radio call or even a cell phone call to that same number. Is if you don't have a radio in your glider, pick up the phone and give me a cell phone call. Again, we answer that phone, and that way we can say, hey, look out for a glider, he's coming into Roanoke. There's no problem with that at all. You've met the requirement of establishing two-way communications. If you don't establish two-way communications, me as a air traffic control supervisor, if you're on the south side of that ridge, you can't get back to Newcastle, you're in an emergency situation. And I would rather have you land at Roanoke Airport than to try to put it down on 581 or somewhere else around there. So, again, these things are things that I went out and looked at. I said, okay, so you come in and you enter our pattern and you land at Roanoke. Well, I know at Newcastle you just roll off the runway, but here it's not quite that easy. We got runway lights sticking up and things like that. Well, if you can get it off on a taxiway, I contacted Landmark Aviation. I said, if a glider shows up here, do you have a provision to get him out? He said, oh yeah. He says, we got tow ropes, we can get wing walkers out there, so they can actually get you back to Landmark. So that was my first concern is, okay, what's going to happen just because you're off the runway doesn't really help you. But Landmark says, no, it's not a problem. We can get them to the ramp here without any problem. So again, it all boils down to communications. Is we can work around anything that happens. The phone call helps. If for some reason your radio doesn't work and you don't have a cell phone, do like you would do in any controlled airport if you're in a powered airplane without a radio. You come in, you enter a pattern, you look for airplanes, and you land. You look for a light signal, and hopefully my people are looking out the window enough that they actually see you out there and realize, hey, that looks like your glider. I wonder what he's doing here in Roanoke. And then they put it together that, hey, he's not supposed to be here, he must want to land. So I'm going to go back and make sure that my people all say, hey, we're coming up on glider season. If one shows up